Welcome to another episode of our Personal Empowerment Premium Audio Series, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is about belief systems. You know, really underneath it all, when we're born, we're not really exactly a blank slate. I mean, we do know how to suck, and there are a few things we're afraid of, like falling, but pretty much there's a lot of blank stuff to be written on. And what comes first really is the feeling of, do I feel safe or do I not feel safe? And from there, almost all of other belief systems are born. You know, a lot of what we believe, we know why we believe. We had experiences that showed us this is what we ought to believe. But there's a lot of stuff we believe just because we think we're supposed to believe it. You know, it came from our parents. They believed it, so we just go along and believe it. One thing that always occurs to me that people either figured out on their own or have grabbed from other people is, what do you think about life after death? Is it like something that you've thought through and think, well, I've decided there is or there isn't? Or is that something like because of what you learned in childhood, a religion you accepted or a philosophy that you agreed with, that came from there? You got to think about these belief systems we have. Are they self-adopted or are they sort of imposed upon us? Where do they actually come from?
Yeah, especially religion and politics. My wife showed me a cartoon recently of a baby being born, and on the table next to where the baby's being born are branding irons. And each branding iron, they have one for each religion, right? The Star of David for Jew, the cross for Christian, the crescent moon and star for Islam, and so on. And the caption had to do with, let the baby decide for itself as it gets older. And yet, that's what we tend to do. I think because we still, not everybody, but generally speaking, see our kids as our possessions. And we want for them what we want for ourselves, whether we get it or not. Lots of times, our unfulfilled dreams, we want them to accomplish for us. And then we'll live vicariously, requiring our kids to succeed where we have failed. But how often do we check in with the kids? You know, like, what do they want? And then on the other hand, you have this reciprocating desire on the part of the children to please the parents. So if you're born in Calcutta, the chance of becoming a Jew in life, for example, or if you're born in Milwaukee, the chances of becoming a Muslim at some point in life or a Hindu is pretty small. These are still very culturally identified belief systems. And maybe at some point in the future, there will be, if not part of our education, a passage in life where you immerse yourself in the study of comparative religion and philosophy. Imagine. And it would be unthinkable before that time to say, well, I'm a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist. You would just say, well, I'm a student and I'm studying, and I'll get back to you after I've decided which of these fits my particular belief system. Also, I think there's basically two reasons that we choose to believe what we believe in spite of the knowledge or the facts. One is because we really, really love the idea, and the other, I think, is because we're afraid not to. Love and fear, I think, are the two motivators here.
Yeah, as they often are. In fact, probably the basic belief system that we adopt early in our childhood is, am I going to be focusing my life on love, or am I going to be focusing my life on fear? Or another way of putting that is, am I going to be an optimist or a pessimist? Now, it really is what it comes down to. At some point in childhood, children decide that it's better to enjoy the idea of having big dreams and accomplishing some of them and failing at others, whereas other kids decide it's not worth risking having big dreams and risking failing because that hurts too much, so I'll just keep it small. I just won't have any goals, or I'll have little goals, or I'll be terrified of disappointment, and therefore I won't try for anything again. And that's what really breaks down into the optimism or pessimism belief system. Now, the belief systems are very interesting. The pessimist basically believes I'm going to prepare for the worst, because if the best happens, of course I can deal with that. That's no big deal. That's easy to deal with. And if I'm prepared for the worst, then I can mitigate that, and it won't be so bad. So there's some logic to the pessimistic belief system. The optimist, of course, says that the Pollyanna optimist says nothing bad's ever going to happen to me, but the realistic optimist says, okay, I'm going to prepare for the worst, by having a plan for the very worst case scenario, knowing I couldn't possibly have a plan for everything that could go wrong. I'm going to have a plan for worst case, knowing I can handle anything less than that. But I'm going to focus all of my energy on what could go right, on the positive, knowing that it's about the journey, not the destination, knowing that the optimist has a wonderful time on the way to finding out if they're right, whereas the pessimist has a terrible time on the way to finding out that they're right. Because pessimists usually, they wait for that one moment of I told you so, see, I knew it wouldn't work, see, I was right moment. So that's a basic belief system we have in life that colors virtually everything else we do. For example, pessimists are much more likely to have negative superstitions. Like if they break the mirror, bad stuff's going to happen to them. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bad stuff does happen to them because of all the stuff that happens to them, they most notice the bad stuff. If you're expecting bad stuff to happen, good stuff happens, bad stuff happens. The bad stuff is much shinier. It's much brighter. You pay much more attention to it. And so the negative superstitions that people have, like a run of bad luck kind of, the feel that like if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. That kind of feeling comes from this basic decision that life is dangerous and I'm going to be paying attention to the stuff that could go wrong, living with fear, rather than, life is a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to focus on what could go right, living with excitement.
Don't you think that the tendency to develop as a pessimist is likely to come from having had critical parents? And so you try to protect yourself from their criticism by hedging your bets and sort of being a victim of life. I mean, pessimists, I think, are also less responsible and more helpless, more likely to play victim. Well, there you go. I told you. That always seems to happen to me. What are you going to do,
Yeah, critical parents and overprotective parents. In all good conscience, they're saying to their kids stuff like, sweetheart, don't get your hopes up too high. We wouldn't want you to be disappointed. Now, that may not be a critical parent. That may be a real loving, but don't try anything too grandiose or too big or too great, because then you might fail, and failure is a bad thing. So don't attempt that. There's a criticalness to it, because they really are saying you're not that good. Like don't attempt this thing you're thinking of because you're not good enough for that. So I suppose there's a criticalness, but they may come across not as critical, but rather simply overprotective, trying to protect their children from the pain of disappointment. Well, one of the keys to becoming safe in the world is to know that disappointment is not that big a deal, and that you can, shoot for the bullseye, and even if you don't hit it, you'll enjoy the journey on the way.
I think my parents, my dad especially, was concerned with whether I was smart enough. And, something that I often remember hearing was, why would you say that? As if the implication is, boy, are you an idiot? Are you a moron?
Was this as a little kid or more a teenager?
Even as a young teenager.
Yeah.
And then my father sort of disappeared
Right.
from my life by the time I was 12, 13 years old. But why would you say that? Almost as if I was a reflection of him. So if I wasn't all that bright, then that would prove his fears that he wasn't really all that bright, which, even though he was a young man by that time, I think that probably was about his childhood and his father's expectations and beliefs. But that imprints on you. There's an imprinting not just at birth. That continues. Those expectations and beliefs are put upon you. And, listening to you, it also occurs to me that a belief is less about thinking than feeling. I think a belief is more emotional. I think it falls into the category of faith, or how you feel about something rather than critical thought one way or the other. It's just, you say to people, why do you believe that's true? They'll often say, I don't know. Like, well, do you have facts? Do you have an experience to back that up? Have you done the research? No, I just believe. Or they'll say sometimes, I know this to be true, but they don't know it at all. They just believe strongly that that is the case. And yet, if we don't know why we believe what we believe, what does that say about us as rational creatures? We like to think of ourselves as thoughtful beings, but so much of what we believe and therefore act upon is really emotional in nature.
Yeah, the stuff we really don't understand at all. Logic. I mean, for example, I believe in gravity. I believe wholeheartedly. I have no idea how it works. And I believe in electricity. I believe that when I push the button, it's going to go on. There's a lot of stuff I believe because I have lots of evidence. My whole life, every time that I took a step, I didn't float off into space. So, gravity, like lots of evidence electricity works. But there's some stuff that, I believe, for example, that I have no evidence for whatsoever. And yet it's like, I believe that when I die, that won't be it. There'll be something else after that. I have no logical reason to believe that's true. Nobody's ever come back that I know of for sure to say that's what happens. It's not exactly the way my religion taught me as a little kid. I don't really believe in the heaven stuff like they have in Judaism, but I do believe something's going to happen. I don't know why I believe that or where I believe that, but it gives me great comfort to believe that. I mean, it's kind of lonely to think that, especially as I'm getting older now, it's kind of lonely to think that if I die, that's it. There's nothing, the body disintegrates into ashes to ashes and dust to dust stuff, but I kind of think there's a consciousness that continues on. That's a belief system that I have. And it affects my life. Belief systems affect our lives, whether or not they're real or true. For example, I have a belief that I'm a very fortunate guy. I've always believed like I was almost like born under a lucky star. I was born in the 1950s in America. I mean, could you pick a better time in the history of the world or a better place in the history of the world to be born than in the 1950s and in the United States of America? And I was born like in a middle class where there wasn't the horrid poverty that some people experience, or what was Dylan's line? I'm wounded like a rich man's son. I didn't have it.
Curse of prosperity.
Yeah. So I had to do it myself. I don't know. There's so many blessings that I could count, but yet somebody else born the same day in the same town might be the most unhappy pessimist, might be the most sickly and disgusting, horrible. It wasn't the circumstances it was my belief about the circumstances that caused my life. And it's our beliefs that cause us. I mean, you can take the data and interpret it any which way. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. You can interpret data any way you want. It's not, Michael talks about this all the time. It's really not just a simple stimulus response thing that goes on. There's this perception thing in the middle. There's this, after stuff happens, whatever the stimulus is, how we choose to see it, the attitude we have, the belief systems we have, the mood, the point of view we take right there. That's what belief systems are all about. It's the thing that comes between the stimulus and the response.
What's exciting for me about all of this is that the empiricists, the hardcore physical material scientists are coming on board and inventing new concepts, words like neuroplasticity, for example. What a great word. It means that your brain, not only your mind, but in a sense, the working of the physical organ that is the brain is so malleable, so plastic, that pretty much any belief system that falls within certain parameters of physics tends to become the reality for that individual. Again, if you believe that something is true, that you have an ability to do this or an inability to do that, like maybe you learned early in childhood that you are a clumsy individual and you'll never be any good at this or that or the other thing. Well, as Steve said, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And now we have scientists saying, well, yeah, look what happens in the brain. The way the brain responds and corresponds to these belief systems. Well, we could flip that around. If believing I'm clumsy and I'm not very good at this and I'll never be any good at that becomes self-fulfilling because the brain actually conforms to it, well, then the reverse is true. Like, I don't have a natural talent for this or that, but I really like it, so I'm going to develop it. And the brain corresponds, conforms to your positive belief system, that I'm getting better and better and that I'm developing and growing and expanding my ability to do this or be this or have that. And then you start thinking about our interest in superheroes. At least I do. I think in many ways superheroes are a foreshadowing of who and what humanity could be. If you understand evolution as a tree, and the reason that there are still lower primates, monkeys and apes and gorillas on the tree of life, and yet the center of the tree grew and branched out and became human beings, well, that tree is still growing. Why can't there be another branch of human beings developing in the future, perhaps even at an accelerated rate, due to a deliberate intention to accelerate its evolution? Another level of humanity, another whole kingdom of superheroes, of women and men who are capable of remarkable things, and of course who have the values, the priorities, the ethics, and the morals to go with being a superhero. That just sort of, that's one of the things I like. I guess there are super evil people in the comic books and stories also, but usually your idea of a superhero, somebody with extraordinary powers, is that along with that comes a super sense of their humanity. And so they move in the direction of being godlike or divine. Well, how long before we grab onto that model, to that idea of deliberately, consciously accelerating our evolution and using these principles of neuroplasticity to develop the brain to support these belief systems?
Yeah, simply by going from, say, being a pessimist to being a cautious optimist, you actually change the physical structure of your brain. Who knows what that allows, what possibilities that could follow something like that. So what we're trying to talk about here, let me say that again. So what we're talking about here is that your belief systems are malleable. That is, you can change them. You can examine them. You can decide the ones I have are good for me. I'm going to keep these, but these over here I'm going to adjust, and these I'm going to get rid of altogether. One of the most important belief system changes I ever made in my life, and I think it's contributed to my happiness, my flourishing, my fulfillment in my life, was realizing that the power of my thoughts was in my agreement with them, not in having them. Once I took away all the power from the thought itself, it was just, I love the Rod Serling line, submitted for your approval. Once I took away all the power from every thought I had, because I have some ugly thoughts, just like everybody, I have some terrible thoughts and some wonderful thoughts. Once I took away all the power from the thought and I could step back, that's, if you're talking about the evolution of human mind, that's it. It's the ability to step back and observe the thinking rather than be the thinking. And everybody can do that, and some people do that as a lifestyle, some very evolved people. Some of us do it as much as we can so far, but that's part of that evolution process. Once we can step back, and I was able to, as a young boy, understand that my thoughts were wrong sometimes. I thought like I was stupid sometimes, and I'm not stupid. I'm really smart. I thought some horrible things about myself sometimes, but I realized that I'm not those thoughts. I am not my thoughts. And then I even got that when mommy or daddy slipped and said I was bad, because usually they said my behavior was bad, but once in a while they slipped and said I was bad, I realized, no, I'm not bad. That what I did, I can see that what I did, but I'm not bad. So taking the power out of the words, taking the power out of the thoughts, and taking the power from the thoughts being what's in control of my life to my awareness being what's in control of my life, that shift was, I think, the most important belief system change I ever made.
One of the reasons I really enjoy counseling and working with really young people are the questions that they ask. And I had a fellow ask me the other day, imagine this, he said, is there a love that never leaves you? And I thought, wow, what an incredible question. What a beautiful question. Because I was in my mid to late 30s, I think, before I began to really consider the differences between emotional love and so-called spiritual love. I had a sense from study of religion that the spiritual love was somehow different. Remember pictures of Jesus with his heart hanging outside his body, and it's like, what is that about, this immaculate heart? And then I heard somebody say, oh, well, that's the soul. Well, what's the soul? Is that inside you or above you? They seem to go back and forth on that idea. But the idea that there's a higher heart, or a higher frequency of love, a higher quality of love, that emotional love can hurt you, can cause you to feel like your heart is broken or that you're shattered. There's abandonment and betrayal. Yet there is this quality of love that does not abandon you, that does not leave you, that could not break your heart, that heals, in fact, and solves problems and redeems. And maybe we've made a mistake by calling that love. Religious people have lots of other words for it. Sometimes they call it grace or just spirit. And yet whether you believe in it seems as important as whether you understand it or have even discovered the concept of a higher quality or a higher frequency of love that doesn't leave you, that doesn't abandon you. And I'm not sure why this isn't presented more clearly to young children, because whether it's based on religion or just a higher sense of self, I think through self-esteem alone, without bringing religion to play, without really calling it spiritual love, we could explain you're not a victim of love. Love is not limited to a belief that other people have to give it to you, or that your dog loves you because it likes being scratched behind the ears. You know, that loving feeling when you scratch the dog and it looks at you in that way and wants to be with you. That's your love. That's inside you. And yet a lot of people don't believe it, and so it's not available to them. We look for love from other people, or as I say, pets. We want others to fill us with love, and that becomes our belief system. And so that's really all that's available to us, imagine. And yet, if we could discover and understand and then begin to develop a belief in a concept that love is really how you feel about yourself, and then you can offer it to other people. You can give it away and offer it up and radiate it out into the world without condition, loving other people. Yeah, but it comes from you, not at you. I think this is a real core, fundamental belief system that humanity hasn't really begun to deal with yet in any kind of serious or significant way. They just sort of, the educators and the parents and the heads of our institutions just sort of leave it to us to hash about and try to figure out what is love. That's such a big question. Seems to me that shouldn't really be left to belief. I'm sure there are still people that believe the sun revolves around the earth or that the earth is flat. Those are just belief systems. There are people that believe that, I was thinking about this the other day, NASA never went to the moon. Man's never walked down the moon. It all happened on a Hollywood soundstage or out in the middle of the desert someplace. I mean, do you really believe that that kind of hoax on that level could be pulled off? It's fascinating what people believe and how different belief is from mentality. Belief is often devoid of logic, reasoning, rational, logical, deductive thinking. Again, it's emotional. And to know that, to say, well, the things that I believe are pretty much just emotional. Something I love to believe, whether it's true or not, or something I'm really frightened not to believe, whether it's true or not. I think that's the main lesson in talking about belief systems.
Yeah, it really does. As we said at the beginning, it really does come down to this love and fear thing. At some point, for example, people make a decision, they have a belief system that the purpose of life is growth. And, that includes successes and failures, and I'll learn from my successes and I'll learn from my failures. And there are other people who decide at some point in their life, the purpose of life is success, and I won't risk failures. I'll only, I'm going to go for success, and whatever gives me the best chance of succeeding, I'm not going to take any chances of failing. Failing is bad, succeeding is good. Failing's like getting an F in school, and succeeding is like getting an A. So you're not allowed to get Fs, you only are allowed to get A's, so you're going to live a life that way. That's one belief system then people live that way. People live very stressfully that way. way. There are other people who believe that, I'm going to try new things out. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to push the envelope and step outside of my comfort zone. And I'm going to fail, and I'm going to learn from my failures, and I'm going to grow. Those are two very different belief systems. And the reality doesn't matter to either of those people. You could point out, scientifically this is how it works, and it wouldn't really matter. Just like for some people, you can have all the knowledge in the world. You know that, for example, one of the safest places in the world is on an airplane, and one of the most dangerous places in the world is in a bathtub, and yet you feel safe in a bathtub and you feel endangered on an airplane, and nobody's going to change that. That feeling, that irrational emotional attachment you have, with logic or with statistics or with facts. People believe crazy stuff. I mean, people believe the craziest stuff in the world, not even getting into religion or politics. People believe superstition, for example, is one of the most fascinating things. In sports especially, there's baseball players that have to, click their heels together 3 times, or, they have to scuff off the thing, or they'll never step on the line. Those things work. They really do. Because if you believe that it gives you an edge, then that creates a little more adrenaline or a little more focus or a little more whatever it is. By believing you have a lucky rabbit's foot in your pocket, you're going to look at the world from the point of view of good luck's supposed to happen to me, so I'm not going to pay much attention to the bad things. That's not what I'm looking for. Oh, there's a good thing. See, the lucky rabbit's foot got me that good thing. Even if the world doesn't change, your perception of the world changes, and that changes everything. If you think you're lucky, you're lucky. If people who believe, for example, when in gambling or in sports, that people have streaks, he's on a lucky streak, or in basketball, feed him the ball, he's on a lucky. There's no such thing, because everything is a streak. The likelihood of it being 50-50, you hit, you miss, you hit, you miss. That's impossible. That's 1 in a million. There's going to be streaks. There's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in a row, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in a row. That's what's probably going to happen. So when somebody's on a streak, it's not like an unusual thing. It's the normal thing. But people think, oh, he's on a streak. He's gotten 5 in a row. So therefore, the likelihood of him getting the 6th in the row is increased. Well, of course it's not. It's still the same as it was if he'd never done any in a row before. But the feeling like I'm on a roll, the feeling like I'm on a streak, that increases our ability to perform better in many cases.
That's an excellent point. I remember that in statistics, studying statistics, and the trick question is I toss a coin and I get heads 10 times in a row. What are the odds that I'm going to get heads on the 11th coin flip?
50-50.
And of course it's still 50-50 because they're independent events. But the belief is, well, it's got to come up.
Be tails
yeah, the odds have got to be increasing. Actually, they don't. So what does that say about our desire to see the world the way we wish it to be rather than the way it really is? But then what complicates it is this neuroplasticity and the self-fulfilling prophecy that if you believe it strongly enough, you can influence the event unconsciously for the better or for the worse. In other words, if you really believe that breaking a mirror brings you 7 years of bad luck, and you break a mirror and go, oh, no, now I'm going to have 7 years of bad luck.
There's a bad luck thing. There's another bad luck thing. There's another bad luck thing.
Well, but I'm saying not only do you notice, and then confirm, but the brain goes, okay, we can arrange that.
Let's make some more bad luck happen.
We can arrange for you to drop more things and overlook more opportunities and miss this and screw this up and sabotage that. And so, yeah, I think a big part of it is you just notice the negative more often, if that's your belief. See, evidence that I'm right. That's important to people. Being right is more important than understanding. It's crazy to me that I would rather be right than understand. Seems to me, but then that's just me, that understanding is supreme. This understanding, if I can understand, if I can learn something new, I'll take the hit that I was wrong, if I can get the benefit of understanding. But beyond that, there's this neuroplasticity, the brain, as well as the mind, the heart, our whole psyche, our nature goes, all right, you're in the image of the Creator. You're a very creative being. You're creating your circumstances, your opportunities, the degree of success or failure in any given performance is largely up to you, not these objectives around you. And so the brain will cooperate. It seems increasingly that, okay, whatever you believe, within certain limitations.
Well, I think maybe not, because we call that insanity.
What does it take for me to believe I can walk through a wall? I mean, I can put myself in that headspace of imagining that. Again, I'm a comic book freak.
Sure, and given that that's mostly space between the atoms, and you're mostly space between the atoms,
there you go.
Theoretically possible.
It's only magnetism that prevents that. It's not the particles themselves, because, like you say, it's 99.99999%.
You keep going for another 100 years with those nines.
Galaxies collide, and rarely does anything hit anything. I mean, there's so much space between the stars. And so it is with atoms and electrons and molecules. It's mostly space, and yet there's a resistance, there's a tension, there's a magnetism that prevents me from walking through walls. So both things are true. I guess the real problem here is we want an either or. Are there laws of physics that prevent us from doing anything we believe, or is the mind so powerful that a belief system can make anything possible? Well, it's a little bit of both. There are certain parameters or limitations, but the power of the mind is expanding, and our ability to challenge physics and to recognize increasingly that most of what we call real is simply an agreement. And that ought to give you pause to sit down and reflect a little bit how much of the limitations that I think are imposed upon me are not real except for my belief in them. I mean, let's take people who are limited by being in wheelchairs, paraplegics, and we looked at scores of paraplegics, and we interviewed them and sorted everything out so that on one end of the continuum we have paraplegics in wheelchairs who really can't do much of anything for themselves. But on the other end, we have those who have these special vans with the hand controls, and they're employed, and they go to the wheelchair basketball league on Wednesday night, and they do wheelchair bowling, and they ski down the ski slope in the special wheelchair with skis. And the limitation is not the wheelchair, it's not the paralysis, it's the belief system.
Yeah. So if belief systems are not necessarily logical, and in fact, in some cases, totally illogical, how do you change one? Well, the answer is really quite simple. You find one that's different and you love it more. Whatever you love the most is what you're going to believe. So you find a belief system that is more compatible, that fits you better. I think, again, one of the most significant ones I've ever been through was deciding that I'm not my thoughts. But another one that sort of parallels that was there's an old Jewish proverb, an old story that's told about the greatest gift that you could ever receive, and it was like the information that this too shall pass. Having a belief that I guess there was an old radio show that used to say everything's going to be okay. That no matter what, everything's going to be okay. This good stuff, yeah, it'll last a little while. Then some bad stuff will happen. This bad stuff, yeah, it'll only last a little while. Then some good stuff will happen. Whatever it is, it's going to pass. And instead of believing like a fatalist that inevitably it's all going to go to hell, you can believe that there'll be some bad stuff, there'll be some good stuff. That kind of belief system, I think, is one of the healthiest belief systems you can have. How do you have that? If you're a fatalist now, if you're a negative pessimist and you think you better stay prepared for all the bad stuff that's going to happen, how do you change that? Well, you imagine a world where you feel safe and where you have this belief system that, everything's going to work out. Yeah, there'll be some bad stuff, but everything's going to work out. You imagine yourself being that, and then you love being that. That's what it takes. A belief system will shift as soon as the love for the new system is greater than the love for the old system. You don't have to hate the old way. You just have to create great passion for the new way. The more passion you have for a way you believe, the more powerful that belief system becomes ingrained.
We ought to give attribution to those guys. KABC, Ken Minyard and Bob Arthur really came up with that Eggbach in Los Angeles. Eggbach, everything's gonna be okay. I just think that's brilliant and so unlike radio in this day, which is so mean and so nasty I guess for some reason, radio has worked its way into a corner where there appears to be more money in hate than in love and kindness and tolerance and reassuring people that everything's really going to be okay. So now you go to the talk show to hear venom and nastiness. And it used to be you'd go to hear, hey, everything's going to work out. Everything's going to be okay. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What do you want in your life? I know it's a rather cynical view of the news, but many journalists believe the only reason people read the news is not to be well-informed, but to find out that other people are worse than you are.
Yeah, otherwise they'd sell us good news. If we buy good news, they'd be happy to sell it to us.
There's a little bit of good news, but not a whole lot.
You can't find a whole newspaper or a whole magazine of it.
No, a little bit of success here and some awards there and some breakthroughs over here, but a lot of it is disaster. And then they play it over and over. I mean, how many times have we seen the planes hit the towers in New York City? How many times did we see the Challenger blow up in the sky? And we just like slowing down when there's a horrible traffic accident. We got to fill our brains with that stuff. When you understand neuroplasticity, which is like the physical, empirical version of the self-fulfilling prophecy, you're going to want to work with your belief systems. And you know what we're going to say in terms of where do you go to do that? Certainly, programming the mind or molding it into a particular shape so it produces what you want it to produce is not going to happen when your brain is full of a whole bunch of ideas competing for attention, or when your emotional nature is turbulent. It's going to happen when the mind is relatively quiet and the emotional nature is calm, right? That's focused passion. That's narrow awake. And that's where we're going right now. So get comfortable, sit back, close your eyes, get loose. I always like to do some shoulder shrugs and a couple of head rolls in each direction. You may even want to yawn, stretch your jaw, and then get balanced and centered and take a few nice, slow, deep breaths to begin.
For as you breathe slowly and deeply, too, your mind feels safe inside of you. And you relax and unwind, and all your tension does release as you find yourself in paradise, in a place of perfect peace. With every breath you release, replace tension with peace. With every breath you release, replace tension with peace. And you find your mind unwind. And you feel safe and free. As safe and free as you believe yourself to be.
I'd like you to imagine, with your mind's eye, your ability to visually make stuff up. A bowling alley, a lane with the pins at the opposite end, and the gutters on either side, but this particular bowling lane that I'm going to have you invent and visualize is different in that it has a third gutter right down the middle. And so just as you could easily imagine, especially if you're a bad bowler or a beginner, that ball rolling off the lane, falling into the gutter, and rolling down the gutter to the end, you could easily imagine, just as easily, the ball rolling down the middle gutter, if you will, that groove that goes right into the pocket. and takes down all the pins. That model, or a similar model of success, can be used by you to change your mind. Think of the phrase, to change your mind. To adjust your expectations, to alter your belief systems, to switch from negative to positive, from trying to avoid what you don't want to seeing what you do want before you do it. From practicing with your eyes closed successful outcomes. Now, if that model works for you, a bowling alley with a special groove right in the middle of it takes every ball. Maybe it's even sloped toward the middle so that wherever you release the ball, it's going to roll into that groove in the middle, and you just know it's going to take out all the pins in an explosive strike of success and accomplishment. Imagine using your mind, your brain, your belief systems to expect the best. Now, some part of you might say, hedge your bets. Look at the negative. Plan to fail so that you're not disappointed when you do. That's a childlike, fear-based part of you that can be comforted and reassured as you would any child that was afraid. A child who's just had a bad dream is told, it was just a dream. It wasn't real. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. And take that part of your thinking back to the groove right down the middle. Say things to yourself like, my success is guaranteed. And see yourself achieving, growing, learning, evolving, getting better. Be positive and be specific. Even now, choosing a particular example of creating a successful outcome in your life and adjusting your belief system to create a positive expectation in a successful outcome.
And believe that you're worthy. And believe you are the best. And believe deep in your heart that you are truly blessed. Believe it with great passion. Believe it deep in your soul. Believe that you are worthy. Every part of you is whole. Believe that everything is going to be okay. It'll work out for the best. Believe that there'll be some good stuff and some bad stuff, lots of tests, but believe that you'll get through it. And believe that you'll be fine. Believe it in your heart. Focus with your mind. The more passion that you feel, the more deeply you believe. And with that deep commitment, no telling what you could achieve. So believe the things that serve you. Believe them with all of your heart. Believe that you are worthy. That's a great place for you to start.
And bring this attitude, this new, improved belief system with you back to the waking state. Simply by forming the intention to do so, as you bring to mind what you'll see in a moment when you open your eyes, Take your time and slowly inhaling, fill your lungs, big, full, deep breath. And now, as you exhale, relax, open your eyes, wide awake, back in the room, feeling fine with that positive attitude and that can-do belief system.
I believe.
Better and better than before.
Yeah, it's powerful what belief will do. Get you through whatever hard stuff, whatever good stuff. If you have a strong belief that everything's going to be okay, sometimes the bad stuff, the worst stuff, is the best stuff. The most difficult things that we go through that we're prepared for turn out to be the blessings, the diamond dust, the adversity that shines us up. So be prepared for the bad stuff, but focus on the good stuff. Believe that you deserve to make it through. And the beliefs that you believe with the strongest part of your heart, the most passion, those are the beliefs that come true for you.
Yeah, the belief can carry you through not knowing how to do it. I mean, if you know what you want, you're way ahead of most people who may be focusing on how to do something, but they're really not clear on what they want. Well, instead, know what you want, and it's okay to say, I'm really not sure how to do it, but I know what I want, and I believe I can do it, and I'll figure it out as I head toward that clear goal, like joining us here in Haiku, Maui in April of 2012 for the second Maui Mindfulness Retreat. Now, you may not know how you're going to do that, but if you believe that you're going to be here, if you visualize that, if you close your eyes and imagine the green of the rainforest and the beautiful sparkling beaches and the people that you're going to be with, that Steve and I are going to bring to Maui to study mindfulness in a full immersion environment, a quality of stress relief that you've never experienced in your whole life, 6 days, and then to be able to take that back to the mainland with you and draw upon it simply by pulling the trigger and remembering fully with every cell in your body how it felt to be completely free from stress, worry, and anxiety. That belief system can bring you here. Even if you're not sure, man, how am I gonna pull that off? Start practicing. And if you have any questions, join us, but at least begin to look at the site. Go to focusedpassion.com. There's an ED, as you know, in focusedpassion.com, and click on that big, bright, colorful button in the upper right that says Maui Retreat. Or at our sister site, theagelesswisdom.com. Once you click Enter, you'll see a similar button on the left, Maui Retreat. And you can find out all about it. You see pictures, you'll learn about the whole event, how to register, how to put a deposit down, and take the steps to be with us April 22nd through the 27th of 2012, right here in Maui.
Yeah, and also check out the website for really one of the most remarkable catalogs in self-improvement history. We've got over 200 programs on different self-improvement topics, all with the focus of finding yourself in paradise.
Thanks for being with us today. Join us next week as we continue our personal empowerment premium audio series, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.